Elaine, Jackson, Mira, and Dylan. 4 names tangled in a nightmare no one saw coming. Behind the closed doors of a quiet Washington neighborhood, a hidden darkness festered, waiting to explode into the deadliest family massacre the state has ever known. What secrets did the Mercers keep, and who was the shadow lurking just beneath the surface, ready to destroy everything? The answers will shock you. The house at the end of Ridgeway Drive had always looked a little different from the others. It wasn't neglected, exactly, more like preserved in time. Paint chipped slightly around the window frames, the lawn never quite matched the manicured perfection of the neighbors, and the blinds were always drawn tight. It was quiet. Too quiet. People didn't knock on that door. Delivery drivers left packages on the porch without waiting for a signature. Children avoided the front steps on Halloween, and yet until the spring of 2023, no one had thought twice about it. After all, Elaine Mercer had lived there for over 20 years. She was polite, soft-spoken, and mostly kept to herself. That was enough to be left alone. Elaine's 2 children still lived with her, Jackson, the older one, and Mira, the younger. The family dynamic was mostly a mystery. Neighbors rarely saw them outside together, and there were rumors that Jackson had some sort of condition that made him avoid people. Mira was occasionally seen in scrubs, heading out in the early mornings, presumably to the local hospital where she was training. But she never lingered. No small talk, no smiles. They were just there. And then suddenly, they weren't. On April 3rd, a Monday, the mail carrier noticed that the Mercer mailbox was full. Normally, Elaine was prompt about collecting her mail. He shrugged it off at first, but as he approached the house, something tugged at his senses. The smell was faint but wrong. He paused on the porch, noticing a dead plant tipped over near the welcome mat, brittle leaves scattered like paper. The doorbell didn't work, so he knocked. Nothing. He leaned in and caught the scent again, metallic and heavy. It was the kind of smell you couldn't mistake once you'd known it. He called it in. When police arrived hours later, they had to force the door open. Nothing prepared them for what was inside. The air was thick, stale, and suffocating. Flies buzzed in slow, lazy circles near the ceiling. The house wasn't ransacked. There were no signs of robbery. Instead, it felt undisturbed, like a still life painting, frozen in horror. The bodies of Elaine, Jackson, and Mira were found in separate rooms. Elaine was discovered slumped in her reading chair in the living room, a throw blanket still tucked around her legs. Her eyes were open. Jackson was in his room, face down on the floor, one hand stretched toward his desk. Mira was in the upstairs bathroom, her body twisted awkwardly near the tub. All 3 had been bludgeoned. There was blood, but not as much as the violence suggested. Someone had cleaned. Not thoroughly, but intentionally. Wiping down doorknobs, arranging furniture just so. A framed photo on the mantel, once tilted slightly, now sat perfectly centered. It was the kind of scene that screamed control. There was no forced entry, no broken windows, no alarms triggered. The back door was locked from the inside. It quickly became clear this wasn't the work of a stranger barging in. Whoever had done this had either been invited or was already inside. Detectives scoured the house. In Jackson's room, they found a collection of hard drives and a stack of notebooks filled with messy handwriting and pages torn out. In Mira's closet, a suitcase had been half-packed. A passport was missing. Elaine's calendar in the kitchen had the date April 2nd circled in red, but with no notes explaining why. The initial theory was that Jackson had snapped. The isolated son, possibly unstable, overwhelmed by family tensions, finally erupting in violence. It would have been easy to wrap the story up there, but something didn't sit right. Jackson had no history of violence, no weapons were found, and there was no clear murder weapon at the scene. Then came the basement discovery, a single set of muddy footprints, a cot, an empty food can, a bowl with a spoon left beside it on the floor. The cellar, long unused, had become someone's hiding place. And in that moment, the horror shifted. This wasn't just a murder scene. It was a puzzle with a missing piece, one that didn't belong to the Mercer family. Someone else had been in that house, quietly, watching. The autopsy reports arrived with clinical precision, yet they only deepened the mystery surrounding the Mercer family's final hours. All three, Elaine, Jackson, and Mira, had died from blunt force trauma. The wounds were severe, but the timeline was precise. They had all eaten the same meal the evening before, around 6:45 p.m. The chicken casserole found half-eaten in the kitchen was a simple dish, something Elaine often prepared for her children. Nothing about it seemed unusual, yet the forensic lab found no trace of poison or drugs in their systems. This ruled out anything like poisoning or overdose, leaving only one chilling question. How had they all ended up dead after sharing a peaceful dinner? Detectives combed through the kitchen for clues, but what they found unsettled them even more. The floor, near the back hallway, was smeared with patches of thick mud, footprints leading toward a cellar door that had been locked for years. The house had never needed the basement. It was little more than a dark, forgotten space filled with dusty boxes and old furniture. But now, it looked like someone had been living there, hiding in the shadows. Carefully unlocking the cellar door, the officers descended into a small, dimly lit room. It smelled of damp earth and decay, the kind of place where sunlight never reached. The cot in the corner looked hastily arranged, the blankets folded with deliberate neatness. A bowl and spoon rested on the floor nearby, stained with the remnants of what appeared to be canned soup. Empty cans and food wrappers littered the floor. Whoever had been staying here had made it a temporary home. What caught their attention most was a small black USB drive, taped underneath one of the cellar shelves. It seemed out of place in such an old, forgotten spot. The officers took it carefully, their minds racing with possibilities. What secrets could be stored on this tiny piece of technology? Back at the station, the contents of the drive revealed a disturbing new chapter to the case. The video files showed Jackson Mercer, speaking directly to the camera in a dimly lit room, his face pale and tired. At first he seemed calm, almost resigned, explaining his fears of someone watching him, someone entering the house at night without permission. His voice wavered as he described waking up to sounds he couldn't explain. Whispers, footsteps, the creak of a door opening. He confessed paranoia that someone was living with them, hidden in the walls or basement, watching and waiting. The last few videos became more frantic. Jackson's eyes darted nervously around the room, and he whispered a chilling warning. He's already inside. The final recording abruptly ended with a loud thud and the sound of footsteps retreating into darkness. These videos shattered the original theory that Jackson was the killer. If anything, he was a victim, trapped and terrified inside his own home. But who was he, and how had this intruder gone unnoticed by Elaine and Mira? The notion that someone could live undetected in a family home was terrifying, almost impossible. The police expanded their search, examining the entire property with renewed urgency. They found no hidden entrances, no secret passages, only the cellar, which had become a prison for someone desperate to stay out of sight. The muddy footprints suggested this person had been coming and going through a back door rarely used, perhaps even a small window left ajar during one of the long rainy nights of March. Further forensic analysis revealed traces of this same mud on Elaine's slippers and on the handle of a kitchen knife that had not been used in the attack but was suspiciously out of place. It seemed the intruder had moved freely throughout the house, using Elaine's belongings to avoid leaving obvious signs of forced entry. The question now loomed larger than ever. How had this hidden figure survived inside the Mercer home without detection for so long? How had he managed to kill 3 people and vanish without leaving more evidence? The answer seemed just out of reach, locked away behind silent walls and the haunting videos left behind by Jackson. As the investigation progressed, every new detail twisted the story further. The Mercer family was no longer just victims. They were trapped in a nightmare that had been unfolding right under the noses of an unsuspecting neighborhood. And the shadow lurking in their basement was more dangerous and elusive than anyone could have imagined. Weeks passed in an uneasy haze as detectives followed every lead, but it wasn't until the discovery of fingerprints on a doorknob in the Mercer basement that the case took an unexpected turn. The prints didn't belong to any member of the family. Instead, they matched someone who had slipped through the cracks of the justice system years earlier, Dylan Kane. Dylan was a ghost from Jackson's past, a name whispered among a few who remembered their troubled teenage years together. Once inseparable friends, Dylan's life had spiraled into darkness after a string of petty crimes escalated to a violent robbery. At 17, he was sentenced to juvenile detention, a chapter that left him isolated and bitter. When he was released 2 years prior to the Mercer murders, few expected him to reappear in Bellingham. Yet here he was, back in the shadows. The police dug into his recent history. Dylan had been using a false identity, moving quietly through the city's fringes. Part-time jobs, no permanent address, no known connections. Until now. A background check revealed he'd been working at a small electronics store less than 2 miles from Ridgeway Drive. More chilling was the revelation that he had attempted to contact Jackson Mercer repeatedly in the months before the murders. Social media messages, emails, even old phone numbers. All attempts to reconnect. Detectives pieced together surveillance footage from a nearby gas station, recorded on the night of the killings. It showed a figure matching Dylan's description. Tall, lean, wearing a dark hoodie, stumbling from a nearby wooded area. Mud covering his shoes and pants. He was carrying a large black trash bag, awkwardly clutching it as he moved toward a parked car. The footage was grainy, but the unmistakable metallic glint of something sharp poking from the bag's folds caught the eye of investigators. The police knew then that Dylan hadn't just crossed paths with the Mercers, he had been stalking them, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. But the question of motive remained elusive. Why target a family with no known connection to his past crimes? What had sparked the deadly violence that claimed Elaine, Mira, and Jackson? Further searches of Dylan's rented apartment turned up cryptic notes scribbled in a torn notebook. They contained fragmented thoughts, references to voices, watchers, and being chosen. There were sketches of the Mercer house, detailed floor plans, and a chilling line repeated several times. "They don't see me, but I see them." The pieces formed a picture of a man descending into obsession, a mind consumed by paranoia and rage. Investigators began to theorize that Dylan's mental state had worsened after his release, fueling his fixation on Jackson and his family. But even as the evidence mounted, Dylan maintained his innocence, refusing to answer questions or provide any explanation for his presence at the Mercer home. What no one expected was the deeper darkness hidden beneath the surface of this story. A witness, a former acquaintance of Dylan's, came forward weeks later with a shocking revelation. Dylan had confided in him about plans, not only to reconnect with Jackson, but to take back what was lost. The witness described Dylan as convinced that Jackson was hiding secrets, that the Mercer family was keeping something from the world. This was the first hint that the Mercer household's tragedy was tangled in more than just personal vendettas or old friendships gone wrong. It suggested a web of secrets, perhaps dangerous enough to drive a man to murder. As Dylan was arrested and brought in for questioning, the weight of the case shifted. The quiet neighborhood on Ridgeway Drive had become a battleground for hidden demons and old wounds. But just as the police thought they were closing in, another twist emerged. One that would turn the entire investigation upside down and challenge everything they believed about the Mercer family. Because somewhere in the wreckage of that shattered home, behind the locked doors and faded photographs, there was a secret even Dylan didn't know. One that would reveal just how deep the darkness ran, As the investigation into the Mercer family massacre deepened, attention shifted toward unraveling the hidden lives behind the closed doors of their home. The digital sweep of the family's computers revealed a trove of emails, messages, and private files. Some routine, others cryptic and unsettling. It was Mira's account that held the most unexpected and troubling discoveries. Hundreds of emails sent from Mira's address flooded the inbox of an anonymous recipient. The messages started as innocent updates about her nursing classes and daily life, but grew steadily darker, more urgent. They spoke of fear, confusion, and something lurking beneath the surface of her family's quiet existence. In one message, Mira described Jackson's deteriorating mental state, mentioning episodes of paranoia and fits of anger. In another, she begged for advice about how to handle her mother's insistence on keeping the family together despite mounting tensions. But the most chilling email came only days before the massacre. Mira wrote, "He wants to bring Dylan here. I told him no. But he's already opened the basement door. I'm scared of what they're planning." The message hinted at a secret alliance or an unseen threat within the Mercer household. The vague but heavy words left investigators scrambling to understand who he was and what they were planning. The fact that Mira never left the house despite planning to transfer to a nursing program in Oregon puzzled detectives. Her half-packed suitcase lay hidden in the closet, untouched. Her application to transfer was abruptly canceled, and the IP address used to withdraw her application was traced back to the Mercer home. Someone inside the house had stopped her from escaping. Suspicions arose that perhaps Mira's fears weren't unfounded. Maybe the basement door had indeed been opened recently, as Jackson's videos suggested. And maybe the person hiding there was no stranger but someone known to the family. Digital forensics uncovered deleted emails from Jackson's account. Among them were messages between Jackson and Dylan Kane. Messages filled with coded language discussing meetings, plans, and trust. At first glance, it appeared Jackson had invited Dylan back into his life, but the tone shifted quickly from camaraderie to warning and fear. This revelation added a new layer of complexity. Was Jackson complicit in allowing Dylan into the house? Or had he been manipulated, trapped by an old friend turned menace? And what role had Mira played in all this? Had she been a bystander, a victim, or something more? The tension between the siblings and their mother painted a picture of a family fraying at the edges, each struggling with secrets too heavy to bear. Police theorized that Elaine's attempts to hold the family together only added fuel to a volatile situation, possibly pushing Jackson further into isolation and fear. Questions swirled around the mysterious basement. Why was it opened after years of disuse? What was hidden there that needed protecting? Mira's emails suggested that she knew more than she admitted, that she sensed a threat growing beneath the surface of their daily lives. The investigators found themselves chasing shadows, piecing together fragmented stories from a family that had locked away its darkest truths. And as they dug deeper, it became clear that the real horror was not just the violent deaths, but the secrets and betrayals that had festered in silence for years. The final blow came when a search of Mira's laptop uncovered a deleted video file. It showed a blurred figure entering the basement, carrying a large bag. The timestamp was the night before the murders. The figure moved with quiet urgency, but the face was obscured, hidden in shadows. The evidence painted a haunting picture. The Mercer family massacre was not a simple crime of passion or a random act of violence. It was the culmination of fear, manipulation, and dark alliances. A chilling story of trust broken and family torn apart from within. And in the silence left behind, the question that haunted investigators most was this: if the worst had happened inside those walls, what had the Mercers been trying to keep hidden from the world? The trial of Dylan Kane was meant to bring closure, but instead it only deepened the shadows surrounding the Mercer family massacre. Charged with the brutal murders of Elaine and Mira Mercer, Dylan faced the weight of overwhelming evidence. fingerprints, surveillance footage, and the damning notes found in his apartment. Yet Jackson's death remained the greatest enigma of all. His body showed no defensive wounds, no struggle, no signs of a fatal blow like the others. It was as if he had simply surrendered to whatever darkness consumed that house. As prosecutors prepared their case, investigators pored over every detail to understand Jackson's role in the nightmare. Why hadn't he fought back? Why had he left behind those videos hinting at terror but offering no clear explanation? The silence from beyond the grave was maddening. During the trial, testimonies painted Dylan as a man consumed by obsession, mentally unstable, and dangerous. Yet, despite the evidence, there was no clear motive for why Dylan had killed the Mercers. The prosecution argued that Dylan's fixation on Jackson and the family had driven him to murder, but defense attorneys countered that the family itself hid secrets darker than anyone suspected. Then came the twist no one saw coming. On the eve of the final verdict, Dylan escaped during a routine prison transfer. The van carrying him and several guards veered off the highway, crashing into a river gorge. The guards survived, but Dylan vanished without a trace. The search was exhaustive. Helicopters combed the forest, divers scoured the river, and tracking dogs scoured the muddy banks. But Dylan was gone, disappeared into the dense wilderness like a ghost. His name quickly made it onto the FBI's most wanted list, sending ripples of fear and uncertainty through the community. Meanwhile, questions about Jackson's death persisted. Some speculated that Dylan had coerced or even drugged him, forcing him into silence before killing the others. Others believed Jackson might have been complicit in some way. Perhaps he had planned something too terrible to reveal. Adding to the mystery was the discovery of a photo taken 2 days before the massacre. It showed Dylan standing behind Mira's car in a parking lot, smiling in a way that didn't reach his eyes. The picture suggested he had been stalking the family for weeks, perhaps even months, observing their routines, waiting for the perfect moment to act. The Mercer house on Ridgeway Drive was put up for sale but found no buyers. Locals whispered of strange occurrences. Flickering lights in empty rooms. A swing on the porch, moving gently, despite the still air. Some claimed to hear faint footsteps late at night or catch glimpses of shadows slipping behind curtains. The house became a monument to unresolved pain and unanswered questions, a chilling reminder that some evils never truly leave. The truth behind the massacre, why it happened, how Dylan managed to infiltrate the family, and what secrets Jackson and Mira might have hidden, remained locked away, buried beneath layers of fear and silence. In the end, the worst family massacre in Washington's history left more than just tragedy. It left a riddle without a solution, a haunting presence that lingers in the minds of those who knew the Mercers and those who only knew their story from the news. As for Dylan Kane, he remains out there, somewhere in the shadows, a dangerous and elusive figure with a past full of darkness and a future no one dares to predict. The house waits. The silence waits. And the unanswered questions echo, daring anyone brave enough to seek the truth behind the worst family massacre in Washington history.